Everything exceeded my expectations back then because I had no concept of what the movie business was. And to go from film to film, I just thought that's the way it was. Once you started making movies, then you just made all the movies. Hi, I'm Josh Hartnett, and this is the timeline of my career.
Fuck this, I'm out of here.
I wasn't actually interested in film acting. I was interested in films. I thought maybe I'd want to direct if I could ever find a way to direct. I loved the art of filmmaking and would watch like movie after movie each night. And I fell in love with Federico Fellini and Louis Malle and Bertolucci and like a ton of really just amazing filmmakers. That was sort of my film school. Halloween H2O was the first film that I made, but I was cast first for The Faculty. Just on this TV show called Cracker. I was actually still working on it, and someone asked me if I'd auditioned for a couple of movies. Met Robert Rodriguez, hadn't read the script, and he cast me on the spot, essentially, for Zeke. Many years afterward, I was like, why? What'd you see in me? Like, I didn't know what I was doing. He was like, it's precisely because you didn't know what you were doing. You were like too cool to have read the script that I thought you'd be perfect for Zeke. I was like, it wasn't that I was too cool, it was just I didn't know at all. Robert is such an inclusive director. He just wants to play. He's sitting on a skateboard, and somebody's pulling him with a rope, and he's holding the camera like this. And so he has this sense that like everything is sort of homemade and fun and anything is possible as long as you get it in the can. I learned a lot from Robert on that one. I also like Jon Stewart.
Look, sorry to impose and disrupt, Mr. Furlong, but...
If you kindly take your seats, this will be over quite quickly. Now sit down!
He hadn't released his first book yet, but he's like tested some of the material out on us, let me read an early edition of it. And Jon Stewart became who he is, clearly. I don't know, it was just such a weird, eclectic group of people. Robert Patrick, Bebe Neuwirth, and all the rest of the adult actors, they didn't really mingle with us younger actors. We were our own little crew. You know, we could watch them work, but really they were all sort of enigmatic to us. I was just trying to pick it up as I went along, and I had no concept of like craft, but I was picking up little things from other older actors who were around me or actors who were younger who'd been working a long time. Like Elijah really had an idea of how he wanted to make that character, just trying to fake it.
On this particular day, he ran into Mr. Woodhouse in the hall and ducked into the nearest class.
Meeting Sophia for Virgin Suicides, I could see the artistry in her bearing. She just is an artist. I obviously knew who her father was. I had an expectation of what she would be doing based off of his work. He was producing it, so I expected like him to have a strong hand in the filmmaking process, and none of that was true. All of my expectations were false. She decided to write her own version of the script and deliver it to the producers, and they loved her script, and then she pitched them on her being a first-time director, and they said yes. I mean, that takes incredible gumption, and yet she is like the quietest, most sane director in the world, and I just respected her entirely. She had an enormous amount of integrity, a rare talent, and being able to capture something that's absolutely spectacular and beautiful and ephemeral and do it with such ease and grace. As opposed to being something that's like a monster. A film set can be a monster. It can be a real brutish thing that you've got to work really hard to get these shots in this amount of hours. With Sophia, there was just always an ease about the film set, and that was exciting. And I think those initial films sort of spoiled me, made me think that all film processes would be that way, and not all of them are. Some of them are harder work, but I had a lot of fun on those first films.
My dad took me up a couple times. Just don't do what he did. What do you call it when you flip over?
A barrel roll?
Yeah.
Oh.
Pearl Harbor was by far the biggest film that I've worked on. And I was trepidatious about it because I was very happy with the amount of work that I was getting and the type of directors I was working with, and was, I think, getting a reputation for being an actor that would play a lot of different types of roles. I'd played Iago, essentially, in a modern adaptation of Othello, an archetypical bad guy. And Trip Fontaine isn't necessarily a very nice guy either, and then very kind of innocent and fun in other roles and was able to kind of work on all these different characters. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to blow that up by becoming a type. Also, ultimately, I was thinking maybe you're afraid of this big film because you're afraid of, traditional success or something. And so I decided maybe I'll take the scary path and be a part of it. You read the script and you know it's not going to be a direct historical film. It is a romance. And, a few years after Titanic had come out and they wanted to capitalize on a similar sort of audience. And that Michael Bay makes big spectacle films. He's interested in large aspects of filmmaking, and it's not necessarily about the intimate moments. That said, I get along with Michael really well. I think a lot of people at that time were saying that he's a very difficult director to work with and blah, 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 and watch out. And I didn't have that experience at all. I think Ben took the brunt of some of Michael's unhappiness at times whenever things would go wrong, but they already had a relationship. But I didn't have that experience. I think maybe because I was so green that he just took it easy on me.
You left her to fight somebody else's war. And you made damn sure that I didn't go with you. And we thought that you were dead.
I almost did die, you little son of a bitch. Her face was the last thing that went through my mind. So don't stand here and tell me act like it's all right.
Yeah, Riff, well, I stayed.
In the end, the movie was popular and I was on the cover of a lot of magazines, and it did change the way that people perceived me, like I sort of anticipated, but I guess I didn't anticipate how that would feel to be inside of it, as opposed to seeing it from the outside. Viewing somebody in the midst of sort of a celebrity moment is different than what it feels like on the inside. And at the age of, 21, I didn't have the foresight to sort of understand that. I guess I would say that it felt simultaneously exciting because everybody was interested in me being in their next film. And I was able to go work with Ridley Scott directly afterward. I was able to work with Harrison Ford not too long after that. I was able to kind of work with people that I'd always admired. The other side of the business, the sort of celebrity aspect of it, wasn't really my thing. I didn't fit in with that celebrity moment, which was very MTV at the time, And I wasn't really that kind of a guy. And I think I was too young to have found myself as a human being. And so I was trying to find myself in the midst of everyone else defining me. And I just found myself feeling a little bit frustrated that I wasn't being represented the way that I wanted to be represented, which isn't the way it works. But I didn't know that because I was too young. It felt discombobulating. And I looked for, the things that I find most stabilizing, which is family and friends back home.
Go! Go, Blackbird! OPG! Hold on! No!
It was a natural progression for me because it happened so organically. We had finished Pearl Harbor, and Jerry Bruckheimer called me and said, "Would you like to meet Ridley Scott?" I was like, yes. We had a great conversation, and he was like, "Would you like to play this role?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I happened to be the first one cast. It is an ensemble film, so I didn't ever expect to be on the poster or anything like that. It was just, I wanted to work with Ridley. I wanted to see his process. I wanted to be a part of it. Because I was the first one cast, I didn't know how stacked the cast would be, but it is just filled with so many amazing actors. Entirely different directing styles between Black Hawk Down and Pearl Harbor. I wouldn't compare the two, except for the fact that they both exist in a overarching genre of war film. They don't have much else in the way of narrative comparison or aesthetic comparison. They could be completely different genres, and I think in a way they are. Even though Jerry Bruckheimer is the obvious connective tissue there, having produced them both, but I tried not to compare them at all. I was more looking at what Ridley had done recently and trying to kind of live up to what I believed were the sort of amazing performances in his films over the last few years. And again, still trying to figure out how to act, which was, also, daunting.
No sex for Lent. For 40 days. If I can do that, then everything will be okay.
That isn't what Lent is. Lent is about sacrifice and growth through self-denial. Lent is to
Remember how Christ felt during the fast in the desert? I know exactly. I grew up in the same house as you, moron.
40 Days and 40 Nights is probably not a traditional choice to make. I wouldn't probably go back and do the same thing, although I really enjoyed the process of working with Michael Lehman, and the writer became a friend of mine.
Oh, Whoa!
Ow.
Watch that.
I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay.
Very soon, like tomorrow. I'll give you a call.
The thing is, of its time, but it was different for its time. You know, it was trying to twist the concept of the things that were happening at that time. And there were a lot of like sexy comedies being made, and I thought this was funnier because it was an anti-sexy comedy. It probably didn't age well. I haven't seen it in a long time. I haven't seen it since it came out. Every chance I get to make a comedy, I want to go do it because I love being on a comedic set. You get the most instant gratification. You know when you're on a drama, maybe things are working in the right direction and it might work out, but there's so many things that could go wrong in the edit. On a comedy, if it's not funny, you can tell that on set. But when it is funny, you know that too. And so you get to go home feeling good about yourself. And even though it's very difficult to do, sometimes you make really funny scenes.
She only goes stiff for a moment.
Care for a smoke?
Sure. Take one. Are you as bored by that crowd as I am?
I didn't come here for the party. Came here for you.
Robert Rodriguez and I had maintained contact since doing The Faculty because I had said to Robert on set, supposedly, I don't believe this, but he says that I said to him, if you want me to come back and like sweep the floors for you, I'll do it. Thank you for casting me in my first film. I might have said that, I don't know. You'll have to ask Robert. So Robert called me and he said, time to cash in those chips. I've got this movie I really want to do called Sin City. Frank Miller's unsure, it's his baby. Will you come down to Austin so I can show him what I want to do with it? And we'll just shoot one scene. Frank's going to be there and we can all sort of talk about it. I said, yes, of course I will, Robert, because I owe you. And so I came down and then Frank got very excited about the scene. He loved the visuals. Robert was in real time on the screen, basically showing what the shot would look like. We were shooting on green, obviously, but you could get a sense of what it was going to look like in that really intense black and white. It was unlike anything that had been done before. And I was like, you guys are going to make the coolest movie. See you later, after we had dinner. And I went off to shoot something else. And a couple months later, he said, Josh, will you come back down and shoot one more scene? I think we're going to put the scene in the movie. I said, absolutely. And I came down and they were just like in the midst of finishing the film and they made this wonderful film. It's a great experience. They had a wonderful time, apparently. I wasn't there for it. I had no involvement. So thank you, Robert. So I shoot the last scene, 2 minutes, just standing in an elevator, and then they put it in the film.
Do you want to give me $96,000?
No. Do you want to give me $96,000?
No. Should I?
I don't know. Should you?
I don't know. Should I?
Paul is a notoriously malcontented human being, and he's Scottish, and I love him to death. He's got a really nice accent. He wears really nice hats. He's just like a real character, and he's just always very upset with everything. But underneath that sort of like grumpy exterior, he's a real artist. He's like an absolute artist. And on Wicker Park, there were things that he wanted to do that I know he couldn't fit into that film and that framework. You could just see that there was something that he was struggling to get out because he had done this movie called Gangster #1 that had a lot more sort of a rough edge to it. And we wanted that for Lucky Number Slevin. We did a little rewriting, a little tweaking, and my buddy Jason, he said, what do you think about a towel? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, do you think Slevin should be wearing a towel for the first bit of the movie? Like, just got out of the shower? I was like, yes, that's an amazing idea. How to make yourself as unthreatening as possible when you're going to try to kill a couple of drug lords. Boom, there it is. When I spoke to John Logan about the character to begin with, it's all about tragedy and secrets, right? He's dealing with something that feels like a trauma that he can't articulate, and he's having these blackouts. And there are other symptoms that kind of go into that, like his alcoholism and all that sort of stuff, that I feel like could be neatly placed on other things that are more human. And so I didn't have to go very far to sort of understand where he might be coming from. I don't think he, at the beginning of this, knew exactly what he was. He's running. He's just constantly running. He's as far away from where he came from as possible. How do you develop that character? We had a big open slate, and I had a lot of good conversations with John Logan. We got to a point where we were able to sort of come up with that season 3 arc. Brian Cox playing my father, which was amazing. The whole experience of working on something for a long time with a long arc like that was very satisfying. It's a difficult one because you can get in a situation where you could just let him be a werewolf and that's it. Like, that's the big reveal and that's it. I'm really glad that they were interested in kind of exploring how he became who he is and how he deals with it and where he goes from there.
You must be Oppenheimer.
Yes. I hear you want to start a school of quantum theory.
I am starting it next door.
They put you in there.
I asked for it. Wanted to be close to you experimentalists.
Theory will get you only so far.
I knew Chris from earlier in my career. We didn't work together, and there's all sorts of, conjecture and, conversations that go on around this. I was never offered Batman, so let's put that to bed. Chris has said it, I've said it multiple times. We just talked about it. I thought maybe I'd never hear from him again. It was a big regret of mine that I didn't pursue working with him with more vigor back when I was younger, because I knew he was a fantastic filmmaker, and I knew that being able to sort of foster relationships with great filmmakers is really what this business is about as an actor. And then he brought me the script. I read it, and we talked about Ernest Lawrence, and he told me right off the bat, he's like, this is a real character. There are a lot of characters in this, but this character is important. Killian's the lead, and we've got these other guys, and it's going to be a big deal. And I was flattered, really flattered to be a part of that crew.
I feel like I could see one of those dark stars that you're working on.
You can't. It's the whole point. Gravity swallows light. It's like a kind of hole in space.
What's amazing about working with Chris Nolan is that everybody there knows how important the film could be, how wonderful the film could be because of his presence, and is there to help him make it wonderful, and nobody's there to kind of give themselves, a big ego kick, because you can't. There's no structure for that on a Chris Nolan set. You're all there just working. You don't even have a chair to sit on. You're literally there, focused on it. All the crew members are people that have worked with Chris in the past, so it feels like a family. That's an overused phrase, but it really does. It's a wonderful experience, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
What happened?
I think that woman drank too much, lost her balance. Let's clear out and give him some space.
I've always wanted to work with Knight. I would have probably done almost anything with Knight, because I've always found him to be one of the most fascinating filmmakers in our business. Terribly underrated sometimes for his amazing abilities as just a straight teller of interesting stories. In this situation, what really highlighted my interest, the character Cooper is so neon colored. He's so dark and he's so light, and there's so much in between, and it needs to all be grounded somehow.
Hey, we should climb down and see where it leads. It looks really cool.
What?
Would it be unbelievable to see what's down there? See how they put on the show? There might be costumes and things.
That's crazy. We can't go down there. You're acting strange. Is something wrong, Dad?
No.
Knight's gonna use his camera the way that he uses his camera. He's gonna approach this thriller genre the way he does, from a different angle. He's gonna make his traditional antagonist into a protagonist. And so people are gonna have to follow this character and be interested in him the whole way through. And there are very few films probably that I've seen where I would follow a character like this through to the end and still feel like I understood what the journey was for him, And that was our challenge. And I feel like when a challenge like that is put in your lap, you have to take it. It's so rare to be able to get a role like that. We all have this innate ability in our youth to kind of find our own way and make sure that we know what direction we want to head before we listen to other people, and we fight against the sort of social norms coming in and restricting our choices. You just got to try to hold on to it. It's really rewarding when it works out. And even if it doesn't work out, it still feels okay.